Liverpool 2, Manchester City 0, and I think honestly it is time to just admit that Liverpool are the real deal. It's a hard pill to swallow as a Man United fan, and I'm sure many other rival fans have been struggling to swallow this pill, but there is no more reasons and no more legitimate arguments to discredit this Liverpool team. They are sensational. And today they proved it yet again. And people will say that Manchester City are not that great. But remember, two truths can live in the same realm. Liverpool can be an amazing team whilst also acknowledging that Manchester City are terrible at the moment. Those two things can coincide together. And I think, honestly, we just got to give our props to Liverpool, man. As much as it pains me to say as a Manchester United fan, they are the real deal. Arne Slot deserves a lot of credit. Before I talk about individual performances and before I talk about how bad Manchester City were, Arne Slot deserves so much praise because this guy basically only signed Chiesa. He hasn't actually got his own players in. He hasn't actually been given the opportunity to assess the squad and then decide what type of reinforcements he wants to bring in. This is his first season and he's got Liverpool looking like a better team, arguably, than they were under Jurgen Klopp. They pressed really well. They were really secure technically on the ball. They were really sure in what they were doing, both on and off the ball. The cohesion and chemistry is there between every player on that Liverpool pitch. And even when somebody is having an off game and not perhaps having their best game, it's okay because their teammates are covering for them. Mo Salah today didn't really have the greatest of games. Despite getting an assist and a goal, he should have scored that opportunity. He should have buried that opportunity before the penalty. But he missed it. And this was one of those performances where I looked at Mo Salah and I thought to myself, you know what? I'm not going to comment on it because I know this guy. I know this Egyptian guy. He's just going to show up and score a goal that wins Liverpool the game. And lo and behold, not only did he get the assist for Liverpool's first goal, but he ends up burying the penalty in a big moment for Liverpool because he misses that penalty and suddenly the complexion of the game changes. But he buried it, as he always does. Another notable performance, I think, today from Ryan Gravenberch. Wasn't his best game of the season, but there were moments in the game where he really shined for Liverpool. There was a moment where he turned Phil Foden on the halfway line and forced him to get a yellow card. That was pretty funny, to be honest. Like, Man City were getting absolutely cooked. And Liverpool's midfield three of Gravenberch, McAllister and Szoboszlai worked really well today because the physicality was there. They were pressing really high up the pitch. On the ball, they were really direct and quick from point A to point B at lightning speed. They were sensational. Even without Konate at the back, Liverpool still looks solid. With Gomez coming in next to Van Dijk, they look unbreakable. I think the closest Manchester City came to scoring was when Van Dijk made a mistake and Kevin De Bruyne was through one-on-one with Kelleher and he completely botched it. That is a sign to me that Manchester City just didn't have any semblance of control in this game, and it's in part due to how brilliant Liverpool Football Club are. To hold Manchester City to 0 shots on targets throughout 90 minutes is insane. I don't care how bad Manchester City have been recently, that deserves respect. But speaking of which, let's talk about Manchester City. They've been pretty awful, and even though they've only really started to get poor results in the last 7 games, this has been going on for several months. Even when the results were good for Manchester City, they have been awful. But today was a new low. I think collectively, individually, tactically, Manchester City were outclassed in every single area of the game. In terms of possession, Liverpool were better. In terms of chances created and shots on goal, Liverpool were better. In terms of individual quality, Liverpool were better. Defensively, Liverpool were better. Going forward, Liverpool were better. In transition, Liverpool were just better than Manchester City. I've never seen them this bad. Savino, awful. Kevin De Bruyne, awful. Bernardo Silva, beyond awful. Phil Foden, awful. Erling Haaland didn't affect the game. And you know what's funny? Is I always talk about how I prefer number 9s who offer a little bit more than goal scoring. And I think Erling Haaland's performance today and in recent weeks for Manchester City is just proof or vindication of people like me who prefer number 9s who can hold up the ball, number 9s who can actually link up the play, number 9s who, when they're not scoring, are still contributing in a positive way to the team. Erling Haaland, when he's not getting opportunities and his team isn't creating and impacting the game the way he wants to, he's absolutely useless. He doesn't drop deep. He doesn't link up the play. He's not particularly a great dribbler. He's not somebody who has got great playmaking abilities. He's just a classic brute force number 9 who needs people to create chances for him in order for him to bag it to bag goals and be effective. So I don't know, man. Erling Haaland, brilliant goal scorer, but he's just not my cup of tea. And today's another one of those games that I look at with Erling Haaland and I'm like, yeah, not for me, man. Not for me. Anyways, moving on from Erling Haaland, Kyle Walker, awful. Absolutely awful. He's another one who I don't really understand why Pep Guardiola has so much trust in him, because he's clearly just lost it. Whatever it is that made Kyle Walker a great a player for this Manchester City team, whether it's his recovery pace, his physicality, or whatever else people praise Kyle Walker for, none of that is there anymore. He just seems like such an awful footballer when I watch Manchester City nowadays. And I don't really know what's gone wrong with Kyle Walker. Maybe it's just age. But, you know, I'm always hesitant to use that argument because it may come across as just an easy, lazy analysis. As somebody who doesn't watch Manchester City every week, I can't really pinpoint what's wrong with Kyle Walker. But he just looks washed, man. He looks awful. The rest of the team, Ortega, I mean, it's not really his fault that any of the goals went in, but he didn't particularly have a great game either. Just the whole team for Manchester City was awful. The whole team, everyone who came on from the bench and everybody who started was awful. That's crazy to say out loud. The fact that they didn't have a single shot on target for an entire game of football is insane. It is absolutely criminal. And Pep Guardiola, let's talk about him just before I end off the video. I'm not going to criticize him too much because obviously I have a lot of respect for what he's done at Manchester City. And we can bring up the 115 and all that stuff. I'm not going to do that. I'm just not that type of fan personally. I just, I don't really think it's relevant to the conversation until Manchester City are either found guilty or not in court. I don't really care about the 115, just my personal opinion. But Pep Guardiola, for a long time now, I felt like has been kind of found out at Manchester City. And when I say a long time, I say about 18 months. It just feels like Manchester City have lost that X factor. Even when they won the league last season, it was close. It came down to the last day. And if it wasn't for Rodri's long-range effort and a couple of goals that Rodri scored throughout the season, I wonder if Manchester City would have actually won the league last season if it wasn't for the individual brilliance of Rodri. And a part of me is starting to feel like Pep Guardiola is just, he doesn't have any novelties in terms of his tactical ideas anymore. Like, there's nothing new about Pep Guardiola. He's no longer this innovative manager who's revolutionizing Premier League football. It just feels like football has kind of moved on from him. Everybody's kind of caught up to what Pep Guardiola, how he sets up, what makes his teams tick. And it seems like without his best players, his system completely falls apart. And there is a huge question mark over whether or not he'll be able to get himself out of this rut, especially after that self-harm incident in Manchester City's last game. I can't even remember who it was. I think they drew 3-3 to Feyenoord, and Pep Guardiola was talking about wanting to harm himself and having cuts all over his face. Crazy. I think he's lost it. Not only has he lost the dressing room and the belief of the players, but I think he's just kind of lost his mind, if I'm being completely honest. He genuinely seems like a lunatic. He seems like a madman. And I mean that sincerely. I don't mean that to be funny. I don't mean that as banter. I mean that sincerely, you know. I don't really want to joke about mental health on this channel, but Pep Guardiola he doesn't look okay, man. He looks kind of crazy. So I think this is the beginning of the end. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Liverpool smoking Manchester City 2-0, going 11 points clear of the defending champions, and I believe 9 points clear of Arsenal. Crazy. This Manchester City downfall is beautiful to watch. It's been your boy Triple M. Leave a like in the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Adios.